Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the JusticeCast. I am Vernon Jones, here to take you through today. I am joined, as always, with my brilliant people off camera today. The producer, the hostess with the mostest. Wait, that's me. The producer with the swag, with the brains. Caleb behind the curtain today again is the Great Wizard of Oz. It's IL. Good to have them both in studio with us today. Hey, I know we're gonna talk education, but I know many of you guys have heard over with in the last hour or so. One of the legends, one of the kind people of our time who has given her life to not only entertaining us, but I think also lifting up our spirits as a nation, as a people. She, in the person of the great Dolly Parton, got news today that she passed away. Had been struggling with some health things, and I loved it that the person, her security guy, head of her security, who announced her passing today, said, "This is a grief that is hard for us," and he said it's not hard for Dolly. Because, as Dolly's faith said, Dolly is in the arms of Jesus in this moment. So, we just want to thank Miss Parton. We were talking about her reading program where she sends books out every month to young people. I have two grandchildren who are both at the age of 3, and they are part of that little reading club, and they get their monthly books, and really appreciate that. And so many things that Dolly Parton has done for the world, over 80 years of living. And I love the part where I say 80 years of living because I believe like she's lived a good life to where she lifted the lives of other people. And so, to her family, to all her fans, and to everybody, even you young people who may not even know who Dolly Parton is, it's IL does because he likes country music. And he's always, what's that song she used to sing? Did she? No, that was Tammy Wynette, but I think Dolly Parton might have did. Not Stand By Your Man, but Dolly Parton saying, "And I Will Always Love You," right? And that's a song It's I was singing to someone. I'm not going to mention her name on the air, but yeah, Dolly Parton. That is when you talk about the best of us. When you talk about people who have a heart for people and have a heart for the world that can be, I think a Dolly Parton is one of those folks. So, thank you, Dolly Parton, for your life. Thank you, Dolly Parton, for your investment into the lives of other people. And I'm sure that her legacy and her light will continue to live on. And the world that she believed possible is the world that we believe for. We believe that kids should thrive, learn in great schools, and achieve their hopes. And all kids should be literate, right? And that brings us back to what we've been talking about. We talked about CMAS data came out, the Colorado Measures of Academic Success. We have been looking at that, and we've been looking at the Denver Public Schools. We told you that we were going to tiptoe back into our friends in Aurora and look at some other districts as well. But as we were talking about Denver, one of their top schools, the top school in Denver elementary schools, was Polaris. And in the discussion about Polaris, we also brought up Aurora Quest. Aurora Quest is in Aurora Public Schools. And the thing that we know about Polaris and Aurora Quest, both are what we consider specialized schools serving gifted student populations. They have strong academic performance, and for our uh, education compact that we're talking about, the question that it's not simply why do these schools score so well. That's not what we're talking about here with the outcomes of the CMAS. I think when I look at Polaris and I look at Aurora Quest, as kind of a case study for this discussion that we're talking about. The deeper question is what conditions have been intentionally aligned around students that make thriving more likely at Polaris and more likely at Aurora Quest, because I think that is what we are getting at FaithBridge, is that when we look at our Thrive by Design Compact, um, we want to look at the coherence, we want to look at demographics, we want to look at student outcomes, but we believe that the reason you are able to see some success in Polaris and the reason why you're able to see some success in a Aurora Quest is because I believe that there is coherence. I believe that they serve some very different demographics, and we're going to talk about that. And I think we see similar student outcomes. But I think both of them make a case for what we are saying in our education, in our Thrive by Design Compact, is that there is some intentional design work that is at Polaris and is at Aurora Quest that says that systems that have been designed can be redesigned, and we can do intentionally right by students. And I think Polaris and Aurora Quest um, help us with that case study, right? So this is not let's see. This is not us to say, hey, this is this is the silver bullet. Hey, we just you do everything that's going on at Polaris and Aurora Quest. No, everything that we talk about is an opportunity to learn and to say, okay, what is there that we might not be seeing in the larger ecosystem, right? Um, so yeah. So let me give you this. Our Thrive by Design compact. Let me give you that component just so as I get in deeper into this frame and you understand where we're coming from. So governance creates conditions. We've said that governance creates conditions, and that in that part, the core question in that is our policy, structure, resources, accountability, and school design aligned to the student promise, right? So that's what we talk about when we talk about governance. Governance creates the conditions. So again, our policy, structure, resources, accountability, and school design align to the student promise. That's the governance piece. Then we talk about leadership. We say leadership creates culture. And so, do leaders translate the promise into adult beliefs, expectations, relationships, and priorities, right? And then we say practice creates experience. And do students actually experience rigorous, responsive, differentiated, and relationship rich learning? Then we talk about families create expectation and possibility. And the question there is, are families meaningful partners who reinforce possibility, aspiration, advocacy, and belonging? And then we look at, lastly, the beloved community creates power. And the question there is, are trust, belonging, shared responsibility, voice, and relational power strong enough to sustain the work? Had some great conversations earlier today with some leaders in a school district, and our conversation really was centered around that last piece around the beloved community and our ability to sustain the work. Because what we often see in so many places is that we will see a school make a jump for year one, year two, year three. Then all of a sudden, that leadership changes because that leader is now going on to some other opportunity. And we see that school begin to take a dive, and some schools just spiral, and some schools just plateau because the the outcomes, the vision, the hope of a school cannot just be held by one part of that um, continuum, right? It's got to be owned by all of them. And because if it's just owned by one, if you remove that one piece, yeah, definitely things are going to fall apart if everything rested on that one person. So, my emerging hypothesis that you're hearing today is that student thriving becomes more likely when the five forces surrounding students are high quality, mutually reinforcing, and aligned around a shared vision for students. Again, my emerging hypothesis that has been cultivated over the last 20 plus years as one who's been working in the field. But then as I think back to my own journey, so you can say this has kind of been a emerging hypothesis that has been even from my own learning experience in Aurora Public Schools, is that student thriving becomes more likely when five forces surrounding students are high quality, mutually reinforcing, and aligned around a shared vision for students, right? Where those things are absent, within those five forces, those five what we call circles of impact, circles of influence, whatever label you want to put on them, when those things are not where they need to be, that's where we can guarantee you that you're not seeing the outcomes that you need from students, not because the students are not capable, but because we have not been intentional about making sure that all of those areas that we just talked about are equally thriving and being able to provide students what they need. So, governance, leadership, practice, families, and beloved community. So, that takes me to Polaris and Aurora Quest, right? I will say that I have visited Polaris, having worked in DPS before. Worked in DPS, I visited Polaris on a number of occasions. Have not been there recently, except to walk around Polaris because it's near our offices downtown. And Aurora Quest, I know I have interacted with Aurora Quest through students who went to Aurora Quest, and we were engaged with their families and doing some family work there. But again, have not been in Aurora Quest and Polaris recently, right? I do know leadership in both districts, and when we talk about Polaris and Aurora Quest, we hear great things, right? And a lot of the things we just hypothesized about are it's evident that those things are present in Polaris and Aurora Quest. So let's jump in. So, who are the students, Itzael, at Aurora Quest, and who are the students at Polaris, right? This is the conversation here because this is what people often tell us, okay? Well, they're this way because they have those students, and if you had those students, they would be struggling just like us, right? There's a lot there that we're not going to unpack, but I need to say that there's a belief issue if people are saying that, and that's the whole point when I talk about when we talk about the pillar of leadership, right? Does leadership translate the promise into adult beliefs, expectations, relationships, and priorities, right? So if you are immediately saying, "Ugh, there's no way that, if you're saying, well, the only way that Polaris is the way that it is because Polaris has rich, whatever, white kids, and that's the reason why they are. Well, we're going to talk about that. But I'm going to look at the 2025, 2026 October count, right? So this is 2025, 26 October count. And I want to tell you a little bit about the enrollment that we have seen here at both Polaris and both Aurora Quest, right? So 2025, 26 October count, this is coming from the Colorado Department of Education. The enrollment that we had at a Polaris was 351 students. At Aurora Quest, there was 574. Now, when you break that enrollment down by demographics, you have 56% of the students at Polaris, 56.4% of the students at Polaris identified as white. Similarly, at Aurora Quest, 35.4% of the students at Aurora Quest identified as white. In Polaris, you had 3.7% that identified as black, as 20, and at Aurora Quest, 21.8% identified as black. In Polaris, you had 14.5% that identified as Hispanic. In Aurora Quest, that was 19.9. And Asian in Polaris is 11.1. In Aurora Quest, it's 10.6. Two or more races in Polaris was 14.2%. In Aurora Quest, it was 12.2%. Now, look at this. The free and reduced lunch eligibility in 25-26 for Polaris was 14.8%. The free and reduced lunch for Aurora Quest in that same time period, 25-26, 53.3%, right? Special education in Polaris was 8.3%. Special education in Aurora Quest was 5.9%. Those identified in the school as gifted and talented, 78.7% of Polaris, and then at Aurora Quest, 50.2%. English language learners at Polaris was 6.6 and 7.1% in Aurora Quest, right? So a lot of differences there in the demographics. What you know right off is that Aurora Quest serves substantially more a more racially diverse student population. 65% of the students at Aurora Quest are students of color, right? In Polaris, you look at that number, you combine, it's 44% at Polaris. So you're looking at 65% at Aurora Quest, and you're looking at 44% at Polaris. That matters. There's a something to be said about the fact that when we see higher outcomes, that people just automatically assume there must be a lot of white kids there, right? That people just automatically assume, well, there must be a lot of wealthy kids there, right? And so, and we're going to get into that because I'm again, that's surface what people think, right? And then you come to a school like Aurora Quest, and all of a sudden you see high student outcomes, and you see the barrier of what some have called the barrier of free and reduced lunch, a high 53.3%. You see these barriers and you say, there's no way. Some people might say on paper, there's no way this school, Aurora Quest, should be performing at the level that it does. These student outcomes should not be what they are, right? Black students, again, in Aurora Quest, 21.8%, and at Polaris, 3.7%. The the challenges there are again, people make these assumptions that if you have a high population of a certain group of students, and you must not be successful. I think that there's an argument to be made here, right? So what we want to understand is as we look through the lens of our compact, what we understand here is that DPS maintains Polaris as a specialized, highly gifted magnet with defined eligibility and programming. When we look at Aurora Quest, APS operates Quest as a gifted, high potential magnet with district identification, application, lottery, and advanced program structures. And what it suggests to us when we look at that, the system does not lead differentiation chance. School design itself reflects the student promise. So for us, there's a governance act that took place to ensure that differentiation was not left to chance, and that the school design of both Polaris and the school design of both Aurora Quest reinforced the fact that we can redesign what has been designed, right? That we can look at students and we can redesign the structure and the systems of how we educate to meet students where they are so that students can thrive. When we look at the leadership lens, right, there's specialized gifted leadership and student support capacity, reinforce high expectations and differentiated support at Polaris. And we look at Aurora Quest, their mission explicitly joins high potential with rigorous and supportive community. So they both affirm that academic excellence is framed as a culture, not simply a test score target. I want to say that again. In both of the schools, academic excellence is framed as a culture and not simply as a test score target. It's not just that they want students to do well on the test, they want students to do well. That it is expected that we are readers. It is expected that we are mathematicians. It is expected that we are critical thinkers. It is expected that we are XYZ because it is the culture of the school. And so leadership has done that. So leadership has designed that. Leadership has made sure that it is not just simply about doing well on the test. That is a lag measure, right? It's about looking at these lead measures that say, hey, the culture that we set, the belief that we set, the belonging that we set, all of those things will ensure that our lag measure, the outcome on the CMAS, is in agreement with the fact that we've been doing these lead measures. So I don't think it's by accident that we see Polaris succeeding. I don't think it's by accident or chance that we see Aurora Quest succeeding. And in both schools, there is a intentional culture setting that this is what we expect. Academic excellence is what we expect. Community excellence is what we expect. Belonging is what we expect. A high sense of we are in this together is what we expect. And so then you again look again through the compact. You see when it comes to practice, you see that at Polaris, there's acceleration, advanced learning. There's interdisciplinary work. There's differentiation, and there's really strong student centered experiences, right? In Aurora Quest, we see advanced curriculum. We see authentic learning. We see acceleration and enrichment and opportunities to learn with academic peers. Again, students experience a learning environment designed around capacity and growth. This is not by chance. They're not. We're not just rolling the dice at Aurora Quest or Polaris. There is intentionality because of the place that they know that they want to get students. There's a place where this is what we believe about students. This is what we are responsible for to students. Here are the things that they need. And in both places, there's a level of intentionality of all of those forces around the school that is helping that school be what it needs to be. And so it's good for us to good for us to acknowledge that, right? And very, very, very important that we see that. Um, yeah, and so that's exactly what we want to see is that there's intentionality that's going on in all of those schools. So then we talk about families, right? So what does the family experience look like at Polaris, and what does it look like at Aurora Quest, right? Family engagement is part of the specialized school community and support structure. I have friends who send their kids to Polaris, and there's very intentional engagement for the parents at Polaris. And at Aurora Quest, families participate in the application, the identification process, and in the broader school community. Families are seen as partners in both schools, and be it by choice, be it by design, but families are recognized as genuine partners when it comes to success in these schools. Families help reinforce expectations. Families are advocates. Families help to reinforce belonging. Families help to uh, reinforce what's possible for their students. So it happens at both of these schools. And then, the beloved community relationships and community experience, service, and student supports complement the academic rigor. The community plugs in both of these schools in a way that's in harmony with who the community wants to be. It's in harmony with where things want to go. And so you have to ask, okay, if we can do this intentionally in this place, and we can do it intentionally in this place, then can we do it intentionally in every place? And I think the answer is yes. Is it going to be a different level of challenge in some places because there's other factors that we know that we're dealing with? Yeah, and it's going to be different school to school, but still fundamentally, you need governance, you need leadership, you need practitioners, you need families, and you need a beloved community that is surrounding the school, supporting the school, and as we said with folks that we were meeting with this morning, that are moving together to lift that school. If you are, as we said with some of this data in Denver, if you are a school that's at 8% proficiency, then what's the 10-year plan, right, to change that and get us to, let's say, 85%? Let's craft a 10-year plan and let's move all of those pieces together and say, what do we need from each piece, moving interdependently to get this space to a place where we're talking about at least 85% of kids are reading on grade level. Each kid is doing math on grade level, right? So let me say this too, because it's the elephant in the room, right? Um, Aurora Quest is especially important to examine because exceptional academic performance is occurring alongside substantially greater racial and economic diversity, right? Let me say the elephant in the room, okay? The important thing is that um, demographics matter, right? They do. And the deeper question is whether intentionally designed conditions can expand what is possible for students across demographic groups. That is the deeper question that I want us to grapple with, because I believe that what we see at Aurora Quest is answering that question and challenging us to meet the moment with our best thinking, meet the moment with our best intentionality. Because again, let me say it again, Aurora Quest is especially important because it is getting exceptional academic performance and it is occurring alongside substantially greater racial and economic diversity, right? We're talking about 65% of their school being students of color, and we're talking about 53% of those students being eligible for free and reduced lunch. So that's a poverty indicator. So you have a majority minority school, you have a majority free and reduced lunch situation there, and they are getting exceptional academic performance along some of the barriers that in some places are used as excuses. Well, we can't do it because those kids are poor. Oh, we can't do it because those kids are black. We can't do it because those kids are brown. We can't, right? And look, let's be real. Some people are not gonna come out and say it to you like that. But if you go and watch their effort, you go and you see, you can see belief lived out, right? You can go and see what you believe. There, look, and I said this before, and folks, there, not everybody who's in front of our kids should be in front of our kids. Okay, let me just say that. Not everybody who's leading a school should be leading the school in our community, right? That's a real thing. That's something we got to deal with. Some things that we have been talking about forever. I remember leading schools, and we were getting, at the time, there was this thing called forced placement. And this would be when somebody would get cut from another school. And if I had an opening at my school, because of how forced placement worked, I had to take that person because of how the system worked. Now, that person I didn't get to really vet. I didn't really get to talk to. And that person could come into my predominantly, at one point, a predominantly black school. Then as things changed, it became a predominantly Latino school, right? And that person who came in, and I'm thinking of one individual in particular, that person who came in no way fit our culture, because I quickly came to understand that this person did not believe in the possibilities or the potential of black and brown kids. And I said, there's no way this person should be in my building. But at the time, that's what you had to deal with. That's what you had to deal with. You had to navigate that, right? But I think what we see here is at Aurora Quest, right? And if you have the right people in the classroom, if you have the right people leading in the building, if you have the right people aligned with you from your leadership and your governance, and you are working with families and you are working with community, those things that some people call barriers, those things that some people use as excuses, you've used that as, this is just the reality that we are navigating. These are the places where we have to meet our families and our students, and we have to not use those as deficits, but we use those as strengths. And all of those situations that you're in, those things do not stop what we believe your potential to be. Those things do not stop what we believe you possible, right? So, what the question you see is what assumptions about race, income, and achievement does this tale of two schools challenge, right? And what assumptions should we be careful not to make, right? As we look at this comparison of the tale of two schools, right? If Aurora Quest can produce exceptional outcomes with a free and reduced lunch population of 53.3%, what conditions are present that other schools can learn from who are dealing with the same challenges? If Aurora Quest can say, hey, instead of seeing that as a insurmountable barrier, instead of making that as an excuse, we've decided to say, even if you are a child of poverty, even if you are a child who is in a family who does not make as much income as another family, that does not change the reality that we believe that it is possible. We believe in your potential, and we choose to teach to your potential and your promise, and not be distracted by your condition. Right? I think that happens a lot. It's like, okay, we look at the condition of poverty and we say, oh man, right? Or we look at the color of the skin and folks just say, well, look, if again, Aurora Quest can produce the exceptional outcomes with 53.3%. And I know that at other schools in Denver Public Schools, that free and reduced lunch, and even in schools in Aurora, that number is higher, right? So, but if we have a model, if we have an example that is doing something that we're not doing somewhere else, what can we learn from them, right? And then are these outcomes primarily a function of student selection? I heard this one in my inbox. Somebody said, well, Vernon, this somebody's actual words, and I'm not gonna say the person, but they actually said, well, those kids are a different free and reduced lunch. I said, what? They're like, they knew what I'm gonna tell you. They're like, oh, they're different free and reduced lunch, and they get to pick, their poverty. I said, what? You mean to tell me the Roar Quest that they're just saying, okay, well, that's the good poor kid. Oh, and that one's got that. I said, wait, that doesn't even make any sense to me, right? And instead of saying, hey, what can we learn from the approaches at an Aurora Quest? How can we take those learnings and apply those to our own efforts? Um, this is the thing. There's some people who will stop there and say, well, it's a magnet school, or it's a a school they apply to, and they cream off the top. They say this about other schools too, right? It's a they said about other schools, and then but then I say, well, I challenge the person. I said, okay, well, great, well, let's go with that. But why can't we also say that 53.3% of the kids showed up in poverty, and Aurora Quest decided that, hey, thanks for being here. We're going to add value to you as you arrive. We see your worth. We acknowledge your human dignity. We acknowledge your potential. We acknowledge your promise. And we are not distracted by the fact that you come here as a student who is living in poverty. We are going to continue to serve you as we see all kids. And that is full of promise, full of potential, full of the ability and capacity to do what needs to be done, right? And that person couldn't handle that. They just were stuck in the, they were just stuck in the, hey, it's they get to pick their kids, right? And you look at this. What can we learn if we disaggregate this data out, right? We look at 2026 scores, and we look at that and we say, what can we learn from growth by race, free and reduced lunch, multilingual learner status, and disability? As we look at the disaggregated data, what is happening and what is not happening in areas where we are not hitting this, right? There's got to be coherence among all of the five things that we talked about. These five things that we talk about: governance, leadership, practitioners, families, and the beloved community. These are not like five separate checklists, right? That's not what we're talking about. Because a school can have good governance, capable leaders and strong teachers, engaged families, and a positive community, and still struggle if those forces are pulling in different directions, right? Hear me say that again. You can have good governance, you can have a capable leader, you can have strong teachers, you can have engaged families, and a positive community, and still struggle if those folks are moving in different directions, right? So quality times alignment equals compact coherence, right? That's what we say. Quality times alignment equals compact coherence, right? So the quality of your governance, the quality of your leadership, the quality of your teachers, the quality of your families, and the quality of your community times alignment of all of those five forces, or those five circles of impact, equals the coherence that you need to be able to ensure that your school is moving in a way that all students can thrive, right? So compact coherence, as we talk about it, asks whether the five forces reinforce one another around a common student promise, right? So what is the common student promise at a Polaris? What is the common student promise at Aurora Quest? And again, like, having not visited those schools recently, I'm just going to draw this assumption that at Polaris and Aurora Quest, just looking at the student outcomes, there is a student promise that you will be able to read and do math. Let's just make it that simple. There's a student promise at Polaris that you will be able to read and do math at or above grade level. At Aurora Quest, there's a promise that says you will be able to read and do math at or above grade level, right? And so then everything within those pieces, governance, leadership, teachers, families, and positive community, they are moving together around this common student promise, right? And so I think where you see us struggling is when, you might have those things, but everybody's pulling in five different directions, and nobody is moving together to say, hey, what is the student promise that we have made that we need to keep together, right? For us, let me say this: thriving is not test scores, and I said that when we began this CMS. That thriving is not a test score. Thriving is very much not a test score. But when we talk about thriving, what we're talking about is like the full experience of young people. What does the academic achievement look like? What does academic growth look like? What does belonging look like? What does attendance look like? What does student agency look like? What does mental health and wellness look like? What does readiness for the next stage, be that the grade or be that the next season of life, like elementary, ready for middle school ready for high school ready for college? And then what is the level of hope and a sense of possibility, right? All of those things are measurables for us when we talk about our students thriving. It's not just a test scores. As we said the other day, the test score is really a lag that talks about some of those things. Like if you've been creating a sense of belonging, if attendance has been this, if student agency has been this, if you've been prioritizing mental health and wellness, if you've been making sure that you are, fostering and cultivating and stirring a sense of hope and a sense of possibility, we believe like, yeah, you're going to get the outcomes, but if you're not doing those things, you're not going to get the outcomes. So what can we say in this tale of two schools? What can we say in this tale of two schools? What I can say that I believe from a distance that I can conclude that both schools are intentionally designed around gifted and learners, and they demonstrate exceptionally high academic performance. I can say that about both schools. I can say that Aurora Quest serves a substantially more racially and economically diverse population than Polaris. I can say that high achievement at Aurora Quest is visible among the FRL eligible and minority groups in the finalized 2025 SPF. I can say that Polaris combines extremely high achievement with strong academic growth, including an MGP of 70 in ELA and 75 in math, right? So that's the other thing is that I think does need to be said about Polaris is like we assume, right, that, okay, well, there's this, they come in and these kids are academically achieving, but there's also this growth. Like you can have like high kids in a school and they just be plateaued, right? Because they're high kids, they do well on the test score, and you don't see any growth from that level. That usually means like, hey, because they get treated like, oh, they're okay, they're fine, right? You don't see any growth from them because folks are focused down on the other students, right? And so what you see here, even at the Polaris data, is that even with high achieving students, you still see that those high achieving students are even still growing, right? They're even growing, right? So what I would love to do with Polaris and what I would love to do with Aurora Quest is like to dig deeper and look at the coherence of these structures that we're talking about. What does it look like from a governance standpoint? What does it look like from a leadership standpoint? What is happening with the teachers? What is happening with the families? And how does the community help, right? What we're also saying too, what I'm not saying today, just to be very clear today, um, is that we're clear on any of this, right? Is because there's still more to say. Like there is a hypothesis that in these places there is coherence among these supporting systems or these equal partners, right? There's an assumption that there's that coherence, right? So this is saying like, hey, my hypothesis from looking at Polaris, my hypothesis from looking at Aurora Quest, and my hypothesis from evaluating my own learning experience is that in the places where these things have been coherent, there have been outcomes that reflect that coherence, right? So what if thriving is not an accident? And what if thriving is not an accident of who walks through the school door, right? What if it is the result of what adults, families, institutions, and communities intentionally align around students? What if thriving is not an accident, but it is the result of what adults, families, institutions, and communities intentionally align around students? I'm making the hypothesis that the alignment of those people, those bodies, those circles of impact at Polaris and Aurora Quest, there's a level of intentionality around all of those things, and we are seeing the outcomes that we are, not because kids are better at Polaris, or kids are better at Aurora Quest, or kids are greater than at Polaris, or kids are greater than at Aurora Quest. No, we are seeing that in a place that truly aligns these things around kids, kids are successful. And I believe that that is a reality that can happen everywhere across every district. So, again, students will thrive by design and not by chance. So, this is a tale of two schools, right? A tale of two schools. You got Polaris in Denver, and you got Aurora Quest in APS, and you find out that there are some differences in their demographics. There are some differences in who is being served at those schools. But the commonality, I believe, the hypothesis that we have made is that where there is intentionality, students thriving becomes more likely when these five impact circles are high quality, mutually reinforcing, and aligned around a shared vision for students. I wonder if I asked the families at any school in Aurora and Denver and Cherry Creek and Pueblo and Grand Junction, if I asked any family, hey, what is the shared vision for students at your school? I wonder if they could answer. Right? I wonder if every teacher could answer, hey, what is the shared vision for students at your school? I wonder if principals could answer, hey, when you think about your district, what is the shared vision for students? I wonder if those principals would then be able to, I wonder if the superintendent, could be able to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. or superintendent, what is the shared vision for students in your district? And then I wonder, board members, if you stopped a board member of your school district on the elevator and said, hey, what's the shared vision for students in our district? I wonder if all of those people would say the same thing. And then I wonder if you went to the students, said, hey, students, what is the shared vision that your school has for you and that you have for yourself? What is the shared vision? And how are we moving together to the realization of that shared vision? I just wonder. I wonder how that would play out, and I wonder if they would make my hypothesis true that we need high quality, mutually reinforcing, and aligned circles of impact to truly move the needle, as they say, for students expeditiously and intentionally. I'm going to end up. I'm gonna wrap up with some stuff really quick. I told you that I was gonna pick out some APS data and let those of you guys know that as a hard time as it's going to give me, like I'm very proud. My first school that I ever went to was Elkhart Elementary in Aurora Public Schools. Miss Bullock's class, her kindergarten class, is what began my educational shaping, and I could go on and tell you about Elkhart. I could tell you about after I left Elkhart, went to Sable. After I left Sable, went to Dartmouth. Dartmouth Dolphins, white and blue. To our school, we're always true. Swimming very smooth and fast. The spirit will always last. You don't know your elementary school song anywhere? Oh, you do? Good. Daring Dolphin leads the way. Yeah, that's what we used to sing at Dartmouth, right? And so went to Dartmouth and then ended up at Columbia and then graduated from the greatest high school ever, uh, Rangeview High School. And I have a heart for Aurora. I have a heart for Aurora because that's the place that helped to educate me and helped to get me uh, the foundation that I needed to be able to be successful, not just academically, but I believe as a person. And so I know that when there's coherence, that matters, right? And it matters. And even in my situation where there wasn't coherence, I'm grateful for the 3 out of the 5 spaces that were, and those 3 out of the 5 spaces and the grace of God helped me get to where I am today. And I think we can be better. And I look at, in Aurora, same thing with the data that was in Denver. I mean, we have a lot of work to do, and it's not looking at these kids. It's saying, hey, how does the ecosystem of all of those people that we talked about, how does the ecosystem have a shared vision for what we want to see for students and what we want to do with students? I mean, I look at some of the Aurora data, and I'm looking at if, we're talking about Aurora Quest being the top elementary school in Aurora, and then I look at and I'm just we'll go more about Aurora tomorrow. But if I'm looking at the Aurora data, the top school at 92.4% in English language arts, and then your lowest school is 3.8%, right? And so between those two schools, my quick math says that's a gap of 86. I'm sorry, no, that's a gap of 88.6% between that top school and your um, lowest school, as far as, and again, that's not an indication of me about the students. That's not an indication of at all, right? That these students are better than those students, or this school is better than that school. What it does say to me is like, okay, what are those circles of impacts doing differently at Aurora Quest that it should be doing at this other school, right? When there's a gap of 88.6% in student outcomes and from one school to the next. And you look at that same school, Aurora Quest gets 95.8% in math. Look at that, that's fire, right? Aurora Quest, 95.8% in math, and it is literally 90.5% better than the lowest school, that same school that I referenced. But the lowest school in math, it is about, let's see, it's about, yeah, it's about still 90%. So we got to look at that, right? We got to look at that. We got to look at that in both Aurora and both Denver, and we've got to continue to say, how can we ensure governance, leadership, practitioners, families, and beloved community are moving together to ensure a world where kids thrive, learn in great schools, and achieve their hopes. Tomorrow, we'll continue to unpack more of this data. We'll talk a little bit more about Aurora Public Schools. We're going to get a little bit into middle schools tomorrow as well when we talk about both Denver and Aurora. And I'm going to pull in some Cherry Creek stuff. We're going to talk in Denver and Aurora and pull in some Cherry Creek stuff. I will say that we've got a lot of work to do still. And look, let me just say this: it's a pipeline, right? If you're struggling in an elementary school, and those elementary school kids leave not at grade level, not above grade level, they're going to go into a middle school. And if that middle school is not ready and does not have like all of the systems that we just talked about, the continued outcomes the outcomes are going to continue. Let me just say that the outcomes are going to continue, and it plays out as we look at the data. Like right in front of me right now is middle school data from Aurora, and I've got on the other screen middle school data from Denver, and I can look at the elementary school data, and I can tell you where the kids who were at or above grade level went to middle school based on how the middle schools are doing, right? So we got to get it together. We got to have governance. We got to have leadership. We've got to have practitioners. We've got to have families, and we got to have beloved community that is moving together to ensure a world where kids thrive, learn in great schools, and achieve their hopes. We're here for it. That's what we're about. Thank you for joining us today on the Justice Cast. I've been Verda Jones, and we will see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Have a good evening.